I have Jenni Carlson, sports writer for the Oklahoman, with me virtually today. Welcome to the Human Together podcast show.
Hello.
How are you today?
Doing well. Sort of adjusting to the new reality of everybody staying at home and not having any sports. But, I think my family's healthy and that's what matters right now.
Absolutely, absolutely. Today we're going to discuss how the coronavirus has affected the sports world. Before we get into that, for my listeners who may not be familiar with your writings, give us a little bit of background with you and the Oklahoman.
Sure. So I've been here in Oklahoma City covering sports for the Oklahoman for a little over 20 years. I before that spent most of my life in uh, the state north of us. I was born and raised in Kansas and spent a couple years in Kansas City working there. And have been here ever since. And I'm as a general assignment sports columnist for most of the time I've been here. I do a little bit of everything. So, while it might be thunder one day, it might also be a high school basketball game the next. So I love that variety in my job. And, it always provides for excitement and change and just different things going on. So while all of this coronavirus stuff has been going on, I've sort of had a finger on a little bit of everything from the NBA canceling and or being the first to postpone the season to high schools trying to figure out what to do. So while it's one of my favorite things, it's also provided me a lot of different insights into this whole thing. Insight. I don't know if anybody has insight right now, but covering a little bit of everything. It's definitely been interesting to see this whole thing from a lot of different perspectives.
Yeah, I bet you definitely have provided some great insights on that. You've recently written several articles about COVID-19 shutdowns and how they've affected the sports world. In Sunday's edition, you wrote about your connection to sports from an early age. Can you share a little bit about that column?
Yeah, so we decided with sports being on hold right now, we really wanted to do something that allowed not only us as a sports staff to share some things, but also allowed readers and people in our community to share basically what it is about sports that they love. And I was given a chance to sort of lead off, if you will, for this whole series and share about my sort of sports background and the thing that I love. And I grew up in a small town. I actually grew up on a farm. Was a farm kid for about the first 15 or 16 years of my life. And my dad and my grandpa farmed, and that meant a lot of long hours. But one of the things my dad loved to do was hit golf balls and play golf when he could. But sometimes that just meant hitting them in our front yard. And that was where I sort of came first involved in sports. I had done I'd been to games and done other stuff, but that was really the first time I sort of stepped into it. And that was really became my thing. Golf was what I did all through school, high school. I was gonna play in college, didn't. But the thing about golf and the thing about sports that I found out was just how it really gave me, I feel like, a superpower, a self belief that if I worked hard and if I really did everything I could to maximize whatever talent I had, I felt like I could, be in the same conversation as kids that were maybe, better off financially than I was, or maybe they were more athletic than I was even. But I think it gave me a belief that I could do some things that maybe I didn't know were possible before. And to me, that's one of the things that, obviously we miss the games, we miss the drama, we miss the connection with the teams. But, I really hate that there's so many young people, whether it be, that first T-ball team that somebody was going to play on this spring, or a high school team that somebody's not having a chance to play on this year. I hate that there's younger people out there right now that aren't getting a chance to experience some of those, as I said, superpowers that sports gives us. And, obviously sports isn't perfect. There's a lot of places you can point to that aren't so wonderful. But I think when you drill down to the very essence of what it is, I think that ability to really show people, a higher plane, different things that they can do if they work together, if they do some things that maybe they hadn't tried before. An empowering part of our world, and I miss that. I miss knowing that there are dozens of young people out there, hundreds, thousands of young people out there getting to experience some of those things for the first time. So that's one of those things I'm going to be most happy returns when all this gets back to normal, so to speak.
Absolutely. You mentioned that the Oklahoma sports staff started a kind of an ongoing open discussion with its readers about what sports means to them. And you kind of touched on this. This begs the question, what does sports mean to you personally?
Yeah, I mean it's really become what my life revolves around, you know. I mean, obviously it's a passion that I love, but I think the thing that sports most universally brings, I mean, I think that there are a lot of people like me that saw a lot of power in sports, and it changed who they were and how they acted and reacted and all those sorts of things. But I think more broadly, a lot of what sports is to people is the chance to really be in community in ways that you can't really find anywhere else. And I think that's everything from, you know, if you go to a Thunder game and you see people from all walks of life there, or if you go to a Friday night football game in a small town in Oklahoma, and the way that people can gather there, and maybe they don't see eye to eye, you know, if they're going to the city council meeting in a few more days, maybe they totally disagree on things, but in that moment they really are united behind their team, behind one thing. And I think as much as anything, you know, that's what sports is to a lot of people, is that community, that connection. And that's really, you know, when we talk about what's happening with coronavirus right now, you know, that's one of the things that I think people are trying to find ways to, you know, fill those gaps of community, whether it's technology or, you know, ways that have sprung up of, you know, whether it's helping you know, to deliver meals or to provide you know, necessary aid around our community. I mean, I think in a lot of ways it all comes back to community, but that's one of those things that sports just organically and kind of magically, I think, creates. That you know, I wish that were the case with like the quiz bowl team and the math team, and you know, debate and all those band. I mean, I was a band music kid, so I love sports, but I get those other things too. And I wish those things created community like sports does. But we really love getting together when it's, you know, 30 degrees and we all have to bundle up and cheer for our high school football teams. I don't know what it is. We could be a lot warmer if we went in for the band concert, but everybody loves that sports experience. And I think as much as anything, that's the thing that sports provides that is really almost unique in and of itself, that you really can't find with much else in our world.
And I've experienced those at several levels, going to the local football games, the Thunder games. So that definitely touches a chord with me. The coronavirus has changed our world in recent days. How's it shaped your sports writing?
Oh, geez. I mean, everything right now is really reacting in a lot of ways and trying to shed light on areas that have been touched in ways that maybe people haven't thought about. I think in those early days, obviously, we were kind of at an interesting ground zero we didn't expect to be at, when it was the Thunder's game against the Jazz that essentially set off a lot of the cancellations that we saw around the sports world. Some things have been happening overseas before then, but when it came to the U.S., we hadn't seen much. The NCAA had said actually earlier that day that they were going to have the tournaments, the winter sports, were going to be in front of no fans, but nothing until the NBA had to postpone that Thunder Jazz game had happened that had really changed things. And so that set off a lot. I think that really started to open a lot of eyes, not only sports people, but a broader audience of people that, you know, sort of said, wait a second, when you start to think about a guy who plays basketball in Utah, but he comes to Oklahoma after he's been to Boston and New York and all these other places, and you start to see how quickly one rock thrown in the stream can really start to ripple out and touch people. And it's not just NBA. You're talking about hotel workers and restaurant, wait staff, and just so many different levels of things. I think that really changed the conversation that people had. So in those early days, we were doing a lot of just trying to follow all the different strings that had really come out of Oklahoma City, and that whole experience. And then I think as the days have passed, it's given us a chance to step back and talk to some of the high school athletes and some of the high school teams that they were a lot of teams were actually at sites on Thursday when the state championships got postponed, and so they had a whole different experience of the hope that they were going to play and have a chance to do that. And then, things changed and that didn't happen. May still, but we don't know. Had a chance to, talk to some of them, tell some of those stories. We had some great small college basketball teams that also had seasons ended, whether in Division II or NAIA. So, there's just been a lot of people that have been touched and impacted by this. And it's so weird to think that Wednesday that all of that happened in Oklahoma City. I was actually in Norman that day. OU had their pro day that morning, where football hopefuls for the NFL draft had a chance to run and jump and do all their things to try to show NFL scouts sort of what they could do and try to impress them that they needed to be drafted. And it just seems like a time warp. It just all changed so quickly that we went from, and not to say that's not important, because that's a lifelong dream that those athletes are trying to achieve, but it went from being about the times and the distances and how many reps could you bench press to everybody hitting the pause button and just trying to figure out what's next and how do you stop and give the medical community a chance to have a fighting chance to really stem the tide here. So I think it's really been odd to think that that was 10 days ago or so. It just changed 180 so dramatically that we're still trying to tell the stories of all the things that have been affected by sports. We'll probably never get to all of them before we ramp back up and start having games again at some point, but it's just really, it's carried through so many things that we're doing right now. It's definitely been an interesting time, something I've never thought I would experience. And frankly, once we get through this, whenever that may be, I hope we never have to experience it again.
Absolutely. I think the hardest pill to swallow are those high school seniors who never got to see their last games or that were qualified for state tournaments. And that was kind of the end of their sports careers, and it kind of ended like that. So those are kind of some sad notes coming out of that. So.
Sure. Yeah. And I, it's hard to know how that's all going to go. I think that the state association would like to get those games in, but it may not be possible. We're dealing obviously with a situation where you've got pro athletes on one hand and amateur athletes, those high school and college athletes that very much have their seasons tied to their academic year. So, if school ends up having to go longer than the regular year, maybe we would have a chance to get in some of those high school championships that did get delayed. But you're right, there's a ton of kids and towns and teams that we had a chance to profile. One of my coworkers did, Jones, out east of Oklahoma City, their girls basketball team, making a trip back to state for the first time in a long time. And they got sent off by the town, a big celebration. And before they could get to their first game, the tournament gets postponed. So yeah, just lots of unfortunate moments of disappointment there. And, it is tough. It's very hard to think that, a lot of seniors might have had their season end while they were on their way to a game. I mean, that's not the sort of thing that happens all that often.
Yeah. Moving forward, what are stories you're developing in light of the coronavirus? You've kind of touched on a few of the things. What's coming down the pipe as far as stories that you're going to write?
Yeah, so we're, obviously there are a few things that when it comes to recreational sports, I think we're going to have a look at some of the things that people are still doing to, stay active. I not well, but I run some.
Better than I do, probably.
Not fast. I call myself more of a jogger than a runner, but
Mhm.
I think those are some things people are sort of rediscovering, the simplicity of going out and walking around their neighborhood or running, for 30 minutes or whatever, the chance to be outside and still have that safer distance from other people. Biking, I think there's some different things. Golf courses, although with sort of amended rules and standards and norms, there are still golf courses open. So a chance for people to still have some activity in their life. So those will be some things that we're looking at. But we've also sort of had a chance to try to balance the severity of the situation with maybe some funner, lighter moments and things that we wouldn't otherwise be doing. We've developed a couple of, everybody obviously loves brackets this time of year, March Madness. We all love filling out brackets and, seeing who wins and who loses. So while we don't have actual teams and tournaments to fill out brackets for, we've done a couple of things that, sort of provide the ability to see a bracket and think about who might win and what you might fill out. We had one actually Sunday, 22nd today, that was not every great team, but basically every team that we could come up with their best team. So not everybody was represented, 64 teams. But who was the best Kansas team? Who was the best Kentucky team? Best OU, best OSU. On down the list, we had some teams that may not be thought of as great college basketball teams, but they've had great players over the years. And so some teams that you might not otherwise think about, sort of those Cinderella type stories, if you will. But we did a bracket that said, who are those great teams of all time? And we've asked people to get involved and say who they think would win those games. And we're going to continue that bracket until we come up with a winner. So again, it's not something that is, addressing the seriousness of the moment that we're in. But I think, I there have been times over the years in my career when, I think all of us have those moments when we think, what are we doing in our career that is really helping the greater good? You think about people that are trying to cure cancer or, teaching kids or whatever the case is. There's just so many of those heroes in our world, and sports writers generally aren't seen in the hero category.
Mhm.
But I think that something that I've come to realize is that for some of those heroes, what they see in the sports section or on a website about their favorite team, that's the type of thing that might give them a little release and a little reprieve in what they're doing. So maybe in these moments that, we are dealing with such a crisis, maybe we can provide a little bit of brevity and levity for not only those everyday heroes, because they're, in the ERs and they're providing services in places that need them, even as this is going on. Maybe we can be that for them, but maybe just for, the average mom and dad or the high school kid that needs a little break from his brothers and sisters driving him crazy. I hope that we're striking a little bit of a balance between obviously paying attention to the seriousness of things, but also trying to have a little bit of fun, which we try to do during the regular when we actually have games going on. We're trying to do some of that as well.
Some good things to look forward to despite the circumstances, for sure.
Yeah.
Beyond the coronavirus, you've interviewed and written about lots of athletes from both the amateur and pro ranks. Is there a particular story that has inspired you personally?
Oh my, I mean, so many. I think there are just so many athletes and coaches too. I mean, let's be honest, because they were once upon a time, most of them athletes too, that have overcome great things, done great things. So many. I'm just sitting here trying to think. Within the last few months, I had a chance to write about a gal who doesn't sort of fit into the sort of standard box of athletes, I guess you would think about. A gal who's an attorney here in Oklahoma City. lost her sight when she was younger and became an attorney, even though she really she became legally blind. She could still see a little bit when she was in law school, very large print, but not very much. And she became an attorney, but then in the last 10 years of her life or so, she's always sort of tried to find adaptive sports to get involved with, whether that was maybe tandem biking or different things like that she found enjoyable. And she came around to rowing. And we obviously down the Oklahoma River here in Oklahoma City have a robust and growing rowing scene. And she found a team that was it wasn't a team for disabled or special needs or anything like that. It was a team actually for older rowers, master rowers, and they took her in, and she found basically a home with this group, and has been rowing in a variety of competitions. And she set out at an event here in Oklahoma City to row a single, which as you might imagine, when you can't see, rowing a single is a bit of a challenge. So the fact that this was even something that she attempted she was going to have sort of a guide out in a boat in front of her to give her commands and directions and, degrees this way and, turn that way and all that sort of stuff. But still just the wherewithal to try something different, try something new, to put herself out there, and then to keep pushing. I think those are the things that, obviously there's so many athletes, again, like I said, that, they overcome very difficult circumstances and life situations and those sorts of things. But I think she was one that, when you think about, just continuing to evolve and grow and want to try something new. I think that's a lesson that, we can all stand to hear from time to time. And lots of times I find that those lessons, they don't always come from the people you expect them to come from. Sometimes it's, not the athlete that is getting paid millions of dollars or is a household name. Lots of times those stories can come most and best from athletes that are, just out there doing what they do because they really love it.
That's definitely an inspiring story. I'll have to research and find that one. I missed that when it came out. Lastly, and you kind of touched on this, what is the most rewarding part of being a sports writer?
Oh, I mean, the funnest is going to the games. I know that's not what you asked, but the funnest is going to the games. I'll be honest, that is a blast, and to get to experience the games is really cool. But I think when you talk about the things that are keep me coming back, I think it is sharing those stories of how people got where they are, why they do what they do. I remember when I was very very young in college, and not just young because I was in college. I was actually young when very early in my college career. I was doing some writing, and I got a chance at the time. I was going to the University of Kansas. That's where I got my undergrad. And Roy Williams, who's now the basketball coach at North Carolina, was the basketball coach at Kansas at the time. And I got a chance to go and interview him for a profile feature I was working on. And I had done a bunch of research on him and found a few anecdotes about him that had been written about, weren't completely, beyond the pale. It wasn't something that, nobody knew about, but it wasn't something that had been written a lot about. And he was coming into one of the most successful eras of his entire time at Kansas, had great players, NBA future guys, those sorts of things. And I had a chance to talk to him about his growing up, the experiences of being with a single mom and the lessons he learned from her that, then carried over to his coaching and to his approach and all those sorts of things. And I think just having a chance to sort of pull back that curtain a little bit on, the people, the heroes in a lot of ways, those superstars in many regards that, people see as being, great coaches or athletes or dunkers or quarterbacks or running backs or whatever the case is, and showing that human side. I think it's that's very rewarding to remind people that, yeah, they can do something that probably few of us can do. I mean, there's I had a chance to write about Adrian Peterson, the Oklahoma running back, who now has been in the NFL for a very long time. Had a chance to write about him when he was still in high school. And I just remember, I mean, you hear about players like him who are sort of recruiting superstars, and you think, well, they can't possibly be that good. And I remember seeing film of him, and seeing him in person made me realize he was that good. But at the core, he had a very human story. And I think that whether it was Adrian Peterson or Roy Williams or any number of other athletes, just that very human side of athletes and these personalities, I think that to be able to share that with people, I think that creates a connection that, again, when you talk about the community that's created in sports, I think that just deepens that feeling that fans have, because there's that sense of, maybe they don't know their favorite athlete personally, but maybe there's a part of their story that they feel like they've experienced or that they can connect with. And I think it just, deepens and further connects the fans with those teams and those athletes. And I think that's the thing that is really great. And I think that's one of the reasons why we're missing sports now, is because we really are missing those connections in so many ways. And so I think when we get back to that, like a lot of things, I don't think we're going to take that for granted.
Absolutely. And thank you for sharing that. That's definitely some rewarding aspects of your career. Where can my listeners go to find your readings and your sports writings?
Yeah, for sure. Our website is Oklahoman.com. And if you'll go to our sports page there, Oklahoman.com/sports, you can find a page that has all of my stuff there. There's a link. You can read all sorts of stuff. I think it goes back 2 or 3 weeks. And all of our other writers are on there as well, sharing all of their stories. So yeah, Oklahoman.com is where you can find us.
Well, thank you for taking the time to talk with me today and providing some insight to the sports world as it affects by the coronavirus.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. I appreciate it.
Sports have always been an integral part of my family's life, but I never knew how much I would miss them until the COVID-19 outbreak. Like Mrs. Carlson, I've had to redirect my sports watching to stories rather than live action. Many of the sacrifices that I'm sure some of you are making as well. But pray that one day our sports world will return so we can retain our sanity and continue the journey to become human together.